Sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction. Today, we're diving into a true story from Reddit where someone shared an experience so gripping, you won't believe it's real. Buckle up because this is a ride you don't want to miss. These stories are nice to watch or listen to while you are studying, sleeping, or just relaxing. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you don't want to miss the coming videos. Let's get started.
I've always hated the night, particularly the last moments of consciousness before I fall asleep. I know it's completely ridiculous for a grown man to be afraid of the dark, but I hate the way the shadows grow and shrink as though they have minds of their own, broken only by the slivers of light that make their way between the gaps in the blinders over my window. I hate how the darkness gives my mind the power to materialize its cowardice, and just like that, the pile of clothes strewn across my chair is Leviathan upon his throne. But that's not really it, is it? Do you want to know the real problem with the dark? The dark makes my eyesight too good, so good, that I can see things that aren't visible in the light. To be honest with you, I think I hate the dark because I feel as though it's the only time that I can see what the world really looks like. And what a terrifying place that must be. I pondered on this as I lay in my bed at 3 a.m., the devil sitting in my chair as usual, and the dead woman that haunted my apartment staring at me from the corner of the room. As usual. Did I tell you there's a woman in my apartment? Sorry, must have slipped my mind, so let me go back a bit. The year is 2021, shortly after COVID restrictions had ended, and I was in my last few years of med school, looking forward to my life on the front line of healthcare. Being the real-life hero I've always wanted to be. That was until something happened. No, I did something. One day, I was driving my wife Sarah from her salon appointment when my phone began to vibrate in the center console. A call from my best friend Jared, and I swear I only looked for a second, but the next thing I knew, my car was airborne. I'd smashed into the edge of a turnpike, immediately flipping the vehicle over. The actual event lasted only a few seconds, but the feeling must have been hours. The doors caved in and windows shattered in patterns that were almost beautiful. I saw my wife's freshly cut and washed hair twist and spin in the wind as we rolled around at terminal velocity, all of which ended in an abrupt stop when we crashed into a tree. I sat in my seat, being held in place only by my seatbelt, staring in horror and confusion at the empty passenger seat from which my wife, who was not so prepared, had been ejected and now lay sprawled on the foam roadside. After what seemed like hours, the paramedics arrived, and what I imagine was a first-timer attempted CPR for much longer than was necessary until an older, more experienced medic placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, signaling him to stop. Ultimately, she was pronounced dead on the scene. Now I am haunted, not just mentally, but by a presence slowly manifesting in my home. I didn't notice her the first few months. She was nothing more than a peripheral vision, something I only saw when I walked past mirrors or turned around too quickly. But soon it became inexplicable, and beyond that, inexcusable. Her presence was most pronounced in the moments before I fell asleep, breathing in my ear and caressing my hair in the same loving way she did when she was alive. I never believed in ghosts. Being the man of science I was, it was ridiculous to think that anything exists once bodily functions cease. But here we are. After the accident, I stopped leaving the house altogether, subsisting exclusively on a diet of ramen noodles and Doritos, only leaving my trash-filled apartment to collect my weekly ration. I imagine I'd flunked out of med school by then. I don't know. I stopped checking my emails as they were full of obligatory condolences from people I hadn't spoken to in years. I was a mess, so when I started seeing her appear in my apartment, in some weird way I was actually glad for the company. She never spoke to me outside of a staticky voice in the phone, but her presence made me strangely grateful to be alive and reminded me that she would hate to see me this way. Fast forward to the present day. It's been 3 years since the accident, and the ghostly apparitions had since stopped, as my life began to return to some form of normality. I had re-enrolled in school and started my internship at the local hospital, and that was where I met her. Emily, one of the nurses at the hospital. She had long brown hair and rolling hips that made you want to watch her walk away. Things started off innocently enough. Little glances from across the hall and polite conversation in the elevator, but soon I found myself hoping I'd run into her on my rotations, which is exactly what happened. In fact, much to my surprise, these run-ins magically became more frequent, almost as though we were subconsciously looking for each other. "How are you today?" she said sweetly. "Much better now," I said in my head, and accidentally out loud. She giggled and left the elevator. Soon enough, I found myself complimenting her appearance. Compliments turned to flirting, which turned to making out in unoccupied rooms, and before I knew it, I had a girlfriend. I wasn't sure I was ready for a relationship, but the way her eyes lit up and her voice lilted when she spoke to me was far too convincing to pass up. I wanted to take things slow, though, so whenever things got too hot and heavy, I would always, much to her annoyance, put a stop to it. I hadn't had sex since my wife died, and until I met Emily, I wasn't even sure I wanted it anymore. This continued for about a month until I felt ready, and so one day when we were both off shift, I invited her over to my apartment. She had never been to my place before, so I spent all day cleaning and getting it ready. Up until that point, I hadn't had the heart to take down the pictures of my wife, but I knew it was time to let go, and so with great pain, I removed each picture from the wall, placing them in a shoebox that I then put in my closet. Emily came over at about 5:45. She wore a blue dress with floral print and greeted me with a kiss at the door. Our dinner was full of laughter and light-hearted conversation, something I hadn't had in a while. After which we sat on the couch with a bottle of wine. We both knew what was up, so as soon as we touched the seat, we began kissing like horny teenagers excited for their first time. The sex was passionate and better than either of us could have imagined. We lay naked, cuddling on the couch, post-coital bliss engulfing us. But for some reason, I felt watched, like there were eyes burning themselves into the back of my head, judging me, contemptuous. This continued the next few times she came over, and things only got stranger. Lights flickered and doors slammed. It felt as though every time she touched me, the house would protest in some way, and it wasn't just when Emily was around anymore. I began seeing Sarah again, but this time it was different. She wasn't just a flash in my periphery. She had become a permanent fixture in my apartment, appearing every time I turned off the lights or looked in the mirror, and now she seemed angry. Her face was in a permanent scowl, and her empty eyes followed me around the room. I never mentioned any of this to Emily. I figured I should wait at least a few months before I start sounding batshit crazy. But one night, it all came to a head. Emily lay in bed next to me, soft breaths leaving her mouth as she slept. But sleep did not find me that easily. Instead, I stared at my dead wife as she stared back, and then she did something she had never done before. She began to approach the bed with silent footsteps, and in the blink of an eye, she was on top of Emily, with both of her pale hands around her neck. Her eyes shot open with fear and confusion as Sarah strangled her. I attempted to free Emily, but her grip was ironclad. All I could do was beg and protest as I watched the life leave my girlfriend with wheezes and gasps, and just as it had started, it was over. Emily's hands stopped clawing at Sarah and her arms fell limply to her sides. She was dead. Sarah's grip loosened, and she turned her attention to me, speaking for the first time since her death. Two simple words that would haunt me forever. You're mine. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more.